the last name of this author?
I think it's Cohen.
Cohen?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's still living.
I would assume so. It's a contemporary sefer. It's a very, very recently published. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. So another review item for the just to clarify the parameters of being an arev, of being a guarantor. So he said the sheila is misha amar lechavero shehu arev lo ba'ad yom echad. If a person said, "I'll be your guarantor, but only for one day," I'm not guaranteeing the loan for the entire duration of the loan. On Tuesday of next week, I'll be your guarantor. Hayim nasa arev al osa halva. Does that allow you to be, are you legally bound by that? Oh, Misha Amr Lamal V'tein Ploni Sikum Kach V'kach Shel Kesef Ani Yihiyeh Arev Bishvilo. Or let's say a person says to a lender, give my friend a certain amount and I'll be the guarantor. Oh, Sha'amr Lamal V'lahalvos Lalo V'kach V'kach Mibli Lahazkir V'lomar Shu Arev Bishvil Osa Ha'alva V'asa Ken Hamal V'alpiv. Or let's say I just tell my friend, I tell a lender, my friend Yankel, he needs a loan. Do me a favor, lend him $1,000. And I don't say anything about being a guarantor. Hayim nasa arev al osa halva, otzarach lasas kinyan kadeshia arev b'mamon zeh. Is a verbal instruction to a lender sufficient to make you into a guarantor? Or would you need some kind of transactional act, like signing a contract or making a kinyan, in order to become a legally binding guarantor in RAV? So the answer is, and we saw this before, we said you have to be very careful in the way that you recommend someone for a loan or make a request for someone for a loan. Because sometimes just saying, don't worry, he's good for it, is enough to make you into a guarantor. Because if the lender can prove that the only reason why he lent the guy money was based on your recommendation and that he was relying on you, so then he can take you to court. He can take you to Beis Din and say that you have to make up for this guy's failure to pay for the loan. First of all, if you just say, I'll be your guarantor for one day, the first day, let's say, and then I'm out, that's meaningless. Vim Omar ha'arev b'shas matan mos, halveu v'ani arev nishtabid ha'arev eino tzarech kinyan. To answer your second question, if a person just gives a verbal instruction and says, here, I'll be good. I'll be the guarantor. Don't worry about it. You don't need any kind of kinyan. No transaction is necessary. That's enough to make you legally responsible. V'yesh omrim kol she'amr lamalva halveu v'ani arev afilu shemaisa halva ha'ila'achar zman. Okay, uvilvad shelo over zman rav nasa arev al osa halva ve'eno tzarech kinyan. There is some say that this is true, even if I just tell a person, don't worry, I'll be the guarantor, even if the loan is not done at that moment. Like I go over to a guy in shul and I say, our mutual friend so and so could really use a loan. Do you have any free cash? Like in other words, do you have any money that you can free up to give him a loan? He says, yeah, I have this amount. So I say, do me a favor, lend him the money. I can see this happening on Shabbos, Nit Shabbos Garet, but he really could use the money. And the guy says, is he good for it? So the other guy says, don't worry, I'll be the guarantor. So fine.
Is it illegal in Shabbos?
So that's a good question. First of all, could you do this on Shabbos? I think you can make a good argument that you could do it on Shabbos because you're doing it, even though normally you're not allowed to talk about financial affairs, but you are allowed to talk about giving tzedakah on Shabbos.
Best scenario is on Shabbos.
The best schnorring is on Shabbos. That's Moish, are you speaking from experience? Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
After a piece of kishka and chaim, get what you want.
You ply all your friends with kishka and spirits.
Totally.
So basically, I think you could, because you're doing a chesed. You're arranging to do a chesed. But in that case, even though the loan's not taking place right then and there, so he says, as long as there's not a long time span in between that statement and the loan, you will be legally bound. Now, what happens if I never say, don't worry, I'll guarantee it? What if I just say, can you do me a favor, lend this guy the money, he's good for it. Okay, and it was only based on my instruction that the lender went ahead and lent him the money. If it turns out that the person was not reliable, and he's not the person that I thought he was, it is considered to be that the person who made the recommendation has become the Arev.
Is that true in secular law as well?
No, secular law would require guarantee to be in writing, signed, but the liability would be because of negligent misrepresentation. If you induce somebody to do something on your negligent statement, then that's a tort. So it wouldn't be because you're a guarantor, because you're committed a tort.
Is that an apple or a cherry tort? Okay.
Getting a reference for a person as well.
Yeah, it's a misrepresentation and could be liable.
But would a court say you're liable only partially, or could you be?
Only for the whole loan.
Yeah. Yeah. So that.
Yeah, but if your experience, you've only had good experiences, that it comes on.
Yeah. So then you get into, is it really a misstatement? Is it, if you have reasonable grounds to say what you said, or is it really negligent? No, stuff like that. But
Okay. So like we learned before, you have to be very careful. The best thing to do if you don't want to be on the hook is to say to a person, listen, a guy approached me for a loan. I can't help him. I'm not liquid right now. But if you could help him, that would be really nice. But listen, I can't vouch for the guy. I've never had any dealings with him, and I'm afraid I cannot act as the guarantor on this. If you feel after speaking to him you'd like to lend him the money, I think it would be a nice mitzvah. So that in other words, as long as you present this explicitly, I think you're okay.
But I would say the guy, if you were liquid, you give him the money.
So even if I say yes, right? I probably would give him the money, but that's just because I'm willing to take a chance. See? Yeah. But you have to decide whether you want to take the chance. I can't act as the guarantor. In other words, a lot of times people are prepared to take risks with their own money, but they're more conservative with other people's money. Sometimes it's the other way around.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
right. Okay, next. Ruvain shabike shalva mishimen v'zeh hiskim latet lo sikum shel kesef rak b'tanai sheyavi lo ariv al hava asa. So here's the scenario. Ruvain asks for a loan from Shimon. Shimon says, I'll happily lend you this amount on the condition that you bring me a cosigner. Vim ein lo arev lifnei matan hakesef lo ichbas lo im yavi asa arev acharei alva. And he says, Ruvain says, well, I'm not sure I can get a guarantor in time for the loan that I need. So Shimon says, okay, so bring a guarantor next week, just as long as you have a guarantor. So in that kind of scenario where Shimon's prepared to give him the money, even before he presents the guarantor, but he says, bring me a guarantor later on. V'yesh lishol ha'imo lios ariv acharei halva, v'yanitem litvo es chovo b'mikra shelo shilem haloi v'es chovo. So does that person that Reuven eventually produces, is he a legal guarantor to the point where if Reuven defaults on the loan, the Arev will be on the hook? Oh, eino lavdin arev ve'eino chai v'tashlumin. Or do we say that any guarantor that is brought in after the fact is not a legal guarantor? So the answer is, Mi shehilvet chavero v'achar shehilveu bo chavero shalalova v'omer lamalva ani arev. So any situation where a loan is made and only after the fact of the loan, the Arev presents himself and says, I'm the guarantor. Oh, shetaves halova bedin v'amarlo ani Arev l'shalim l'cha eschova. Or if, let's say, Shimon says to Reuven, your loan is due, pay it up. And a third guy, Levi, comes in and says, please don't harass my friend Reuven. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Okay, Vafilo Omar Ani Arev Bifnei Beistin, even if he says this in front of Beistin, Im Kanu Miyado Sha'asu Kinyan Sidr Al Kachshu Arev Al Mamon Zeh, Bein Asa Kinyan Zeh Bifnei Beistin, Bein Beino Levein Mamalva, Nishtabed Ha'arev Lamalva L'Shalim Esachov Shalalova. It's only if the person who steps forward makes a kinyan, whether in front or in the absence of Beistin, it doesn't matter. But if he makes a kinyan, then he becomes liable because he's committed himself to pay a certain amount of money, but he needs a kinyan since it's after the fact of the loan. Or if Beistin assigns him as an arif, even if it's after the fact, then he'll be legally bound. Such as the Beistin goes over and starts telling Reuven, you're going to have to pay up this debt. And Levi comes along, try to save the day. He says, don't worry. Reuven's still struggling. Don't worry, I'll act as the guarantor. So in that case too, even though Levi did not make a kinyan, he's deriving, he's getting some consideration, and therefore can be legally bound to be the guarantor, even though it's after the loan was made. What kind of consideration is he receiving? He's getting the benefit of having the Beistin esteem him as someone who can take care of other people's loans. And that esteem that he receives from the Beistin is the consideration to the point where that's considered to be an exchange that can be made now legally binding. See, the reason normally you need to make a kinyan is there needs to be consideration. There needs to be some quid pro quo to demonstrate that you're really committed to this. In exchange for this, I'm committing to this, right? And when there's no quid pro quo, when there's no receipt of anything, so Levi can't just become an Ariv automatically since the loan has already been made. But in this case, he's getting something of value. He's getting the prestige of the Beistin trusting him. V'yesh omrim she'im ha'ariv amar lamal v'la'achar halva hanachlo v'im lo yiten l'chahu la'achar zman ani efer l'cha es kol achov nechshav ka'arev b'sha'as matamos. There is an opinion that says that even after the loan is made, if Levi steps forward when he sees that Reuven is being pressed to pay back the loan, and he says, leave him alone, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. If he doesn't pay you back when he needs to, I'll pay you. If he says that explicitly, some say that even if it was said after the loan, that is sufficient to obligate him. So once again, be careful about what you say. Next, Sheila Ariv Shalo Amar Lamalva Halva Leploni Ala Asazos Al Yedei Shaliach Shuhu Ariv Lahalva Shenosein L'Shimon. So the guarantor doesn't say directly to the lender, I will be the guarantor, but sends a message via proxy that he'll act as the guarantor. Ha'imoil lihios ariv al yidei shaliach, o enu yachol lios ariv al yidei shaliach. Can a person become a creditor via proxy? Does that work? Or does it even when there's no paper? Ve'enu yachol litvo oso b'mikra sheshimen lo hechzer salva. And or not. Maybe just because it was sent via proxy, even though I acknowledge that I did say that, but I didn't say it directly to the creditor, is that enough to make me into a guarantor? So tshuva is yesh misha omer im shalach shaliach lamal v'shitin halva l'shimon nasa arev al halva azu v'chayiv v'tashlumin. There is an opinion that says yes, if you send a message to a lender, do me a favor, lend my friend money, that in itself makes you into a guarantor. So even if I write a letter and I put it in the hands of my, I send a note via a friend, and I say, a lot of times people come with, let's say, a letter. Let's say a rabbi writes a letter on behalf of a person who needs to borrow money. And so, and I write a letter to a friend of mine that I have in LA saying, my friend here is really pressed for cash now, and he's looking to make an investment and to really put himself back on the map. Do me a favor and please offer him a loan. So in that case, there is an opinion that says that just by virtue of my writing that letter, that constitutes committing myself to be the guarantor. So you have to be careful about what you do once again. Next.
You always verbatim write letters for people who come around and collect money.
Yeah, but they're usually writing letters to say the guy's legit need for tzedakah. The rabbi's not writing a letter of guarantee. I'm trying to remember if I've ever been in that situation. Nothing comes to mind immediately, but it can potentially be an issue. Rabbis have to be very careful about how far they try to sell something. What I mean in Hilchos tzedakah too. Let's say I write a letter of haskama for a guy saying that the guy's legit and he's really not legit. There could be serious repercussions if I misrepresent someone when I didn't have enough knowledge to know that they are.
So even if you did it by accident?
Well, it depends. It depends if it depends what level of accident it was. Let's say I really believe the guy that he's legit, but I failed to properly investigate, So then that's one thing. I could potentially be held liable if I didn't the guy just said, do me a favor, write me a letter. I mean, there are certain people who might be willing to write a letter just because they want to get the guy off the back. He's a real nudnik. Fine, I'll write you a letter. Just leave me alone. That's not right. Next. Arev sha'amar l'malva halve leploni o shechasam al hashtar shehu arev al halva azu. So a guarantor says to a malva, to a lender, please lend money to Shimon. O shechasam al hashtar shehu arev al halva azu. Or he signs a paper, piece of paper that says, I'll act as the guarantor. V'higiyazman hapiron velo shilam adayin halo v'eschova. The loan has matured. Lo and behold, the borrower has not paid back the debt. Hayim yachol litvo es ha'arev tchila, o kodem yitva es halova. Im lo yimtza ligvos mimenu, aminechasav yachzul arev lifro es chavo shel halova. Does the lender have a right to demand payment from the guarantor first, or must he go through the process of demanding payment from the borrower? So we just learned this like two days ago. You cannot circumvent the proper protocols. The guy's a guarantor, but that means you have to go to the lova first. And if he plays games with you or he disappears and doesn't return your calls, you have to take him to Beis Din. And then once Beis Din gives you a judgment that this guy has defaulted on his loan, then you can go to the guarantor. So that's the way it works. Misha hilva leploni al yidei ariv, afal pish ariv meshubad lemalva, lo yitves ariv tchila ledina lo tveas alov tchila v'yachayivuhu based. So that's exactly what he writes. V'im lo nosam al chozer etzel arvini from menu. And if the borrower still doesn't pay, and the Beis Din finds him liable, so then you can go to the Arev. Bamedvar mamurim b'shein nechasim leloiva. But that's only true if the lova has no assets. Avalim yesh lo nechasim lelova lo yifram min arv klal ela min alova. But if the guy has assets, even if they're non-cash assets, let's say they're real estate or chattel, you still can't go to the guarantor until you've exhausted all collections from the borrower. But that's only if you're a regular arif. But let's say the guy's only willing to lend money if you become the arif kablan, because he says, I know the guy may try to skip town or may try to hide his assets and so forth. So I'm only willing to lend him the money if you become an arif kablan, where you become the first line of collection instead of the last line of collection. Then uveyad hamalva litvos mishayirtze o mehalova tchila o me'arav kablan tchila afal pishiyesh nechasim lova. In that case, the lender can go to the creditor, to the guarantor first, even when the lova has the ability to pay it back. Next.
Can you throw someone out of a house? Like, how far does the Beis Din go in terms of collecting the money? You know, so the guy is,
Well,
he has his asset, his house only, and.
Yeah, in today's world,
Can you spell the house?
yeah, in today's world, the Beis Din would give a writ of, let's say, when you go to Beis Din on monetary issues, you sign a paper of binding arbitration, right? Which means that the Beis Din is acting as a surrogate for the court, so that whatever they rule is upholdable, is like a judgment that you get from a court. So once you do that, so you get a judgment from Beis Din that you can seize any asset, including his home, and then you can take that to the courts, and the courts will go through that process. Now that may take a while. How long would such a thing take?
6 months.
Yeah, I had it for 8 months.
Yeah, it's going to take a few months, but once you get that judgment, you can have a guy evicted from his home. Now, then you have to ask yourself the question, so where's the guy going to go? Do I have any responsibility as a fellow Jew? There's the letter of the law, and then there's the chesed, the compassion, but it all depends on the circumstance, right? What if the guy's been playing you for years, and you just said, I've had enough already. I can't do this anymore. The guy's just been playing off of my good graces, and it's enough already. I've given him plenty of warnings, and he just keeps calling my bluff that he doesn't think I'm going to make good on my threats to repossess his house for the amount of money that he owes us, right? So you have to look at each situation as a unique situation, I think. Okay, she'ela ha'arev lechavero mishtabed min haTorah v'lamdu zos chachamenu zal meYehuda shehaya arev liYaakov lahashav es Binyamin. Where do our rabbis learn out the law of guarantorship? They learn it out from Yehuda. Yehuda told Yaakov, "Don't worry, anochia ervenu miyadi tivakshenu. I will be guarantor for Binyamin to make sure that if you let me take him down to Egypt, I'll get him back." Umatzinu b'divrei Rabbeinu shlosha sugei arevim v'hem arev stam arev kablan v'arev shlof dots v'yesh lishol ma hevdel b'neim b'chinas din arevus ben arev stam arev kablan arev shlof dots. So what is the difference between these three types of arev? And this is all, again, just review. So we're not going to go through all the text. Now, just to review what an arev shlof dots. Ha'arev nechshav l'lova gomer v'hamalva mitnatek min halova v'noitz atzma ha'arev litva me'arev tashlum halva ve'ein hamalva yachal litva min halova klal. So basically, the third type of arev is shlof dots, which means that even if I wanted to go to the debtor first, to the borrower first, I can't. meaning that the borrower is completely removed from the legal proceedings. That's the third type of RAV. I'm telling you, lend my kid brother money, and you don't even think of going to him to collect the loan. I'm the RAV Shlof Dotes, which means my kid brother will have no liability whatsoever. You cannot go to him to collect the loan. You can only come to me. There are certain situations where that would be a preferred choice, right? So you have three levels. The regular RAV is only if you've exhausted all efforts with the LOVA, gone through the based-in process, etc. RAV Kablan is you can go to either of us equally, and RAV Shlof Dotes is you can only go to the guarantor and you cannot go to the borrower at all. Okay? Okay, so we'll hold it here for 10 and we'll continue along.